In the early church, deacons were given the mission to serve the poor, the widows and the orphans. There was no safety net for widows and orphans or the poor. Often they lived on the street. There was no shelter for them. Often they had to beg for food. Well, soon enough, deacons devised ways to serve and to make food available and to comfort those who were in distress, to find shelter for the homeless. The city of Rome experienced great persecution under Emperor Valerian. The Pope himself was put to death and a martyr. Deacons and priests were also put to death. In a few days after Pope Callistus died as a martyr, Lawrence, the deacon in Rome, was told by the authorities to bring the treasures of the church and hand them over. So the authorities in Rome were thinking, okay, Lawrence the deacon will bring us gold and silver. And Lawrence said, give me a few days. So a few days later, the deacon, Lawrence, appeared before the authorities in Rome, and he brought with him the widows and the orphans. He brought with him people who were crippled and blind and deaf, people who had disease. And he pointed to them and said, these are the treasures of the church. So the prefects condemned Lawrence to death by a cruel torture. He was chained upon a gridiron and fire was lighted beneath so that he would burn to death slowly. In our church, we have a beautiful statue of St. Lawrence with that gridiron. And later on, years later, St. Augustine would write about the martyrdom of Lawrence. And he wrote that we are all called to be martyrs because the word martyr means to witness. And St. Augustine wrote, not many of us are called to be the rose, like to be a martyr in the way that Lawrence was put to death. But we are all called to be witnesses to the love of Jesus. So we have the lilies that stand for virgins. We have the ivy that stands for the married couples, the violets that stand for widows. We all have a place. Each and every one of us are called in a special way to witness to the love of Jesus. So the work of reaching out to the poor and needy continues. Here at our parish, we have a food bank. The food pantry is open once a week. People come, families come, they receive sustenance for the month. The Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank supplies some of that, but it's the people of the parish who supply a lot of it, either by donations of canned goods or monetary gifts. And volunteers make it happen. So there are many, many ways that our church family, our parish family, reaches out to those who are hungry and needy, and our church universal too. So the work of the deacons, especially Lawrence, continues. God loves a cheerful giver. So we are all asked to give. We are all asked to contribute to this effort. Jesus would teach later on. He says, when I was hungry, did you give me food? When I was thirsty, did you give me drink? So those are questions that will be asked of us. These are the questions of the final judgment. And Jesus taught, whenever you did it for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it for me. So when we participate in a way that reaches out to the hungry, we are actually serving Jesus himself. And that's why Lawrence continued his work, and he did not cave in to the pressures of the Roman Empire. He continued to show his love for Jesus, even when it meant his very life. So we are called to live our lives as witnesses, to proclaim the good news by our works of charity and compassion.